Here we go, a little Peacock and Williamson live mailbag weekly episode here on Thursdays. Appreciate everybody for jumping in and joining us on this one. We're talking year two quarterbacks. What do quarterbacks see? Where's the jump that quarterbacks see in years 2 and 3 of their careers? We've got follow-ups on our Hall of Fame running backs conversation, Derrick Henry and Frank Gore from yesterday. And what about Sean Payton? Is he overrated as the savior for those Denver Broncos, and a whole lot more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love all the everydayers out there. Appreciate you subscribing up on YouTube and finding us everywhere you get your podcast. Make sure you hit that notification bell and the thumbs up on YouTube so you're notified whenever we do go live and whenever a new episode is up and ready to go. We got a ton of feedback on yesterday's show, Matt, talking about Hall of Famers and current Hall of Famers, and especially some running backs. I want to start with the year two quarterbacks, though, and we had an interesting idea, Matt, in the mailbag from, I think it was from Josh, who is the Jerry Rice of question askers. Let's see, did he have the one? Oh no, here we go. It was from Used Goat. He said, would you and Brian please do two bets with each other based on Brock Purdy and Kenny Pickett, game one and season long, whatever measure you agree on, QBR, touchdown to interception ratio, PFF ranking, yards, whatever. Preferably the bets would be food related because I'm hungry.
I'm hungry too. I'm ready for lunch.
Maybe even hot dog roller related. What do you think? Should we put money on year two quarterbacks, Brock Purdy and Kenny Pickett, who were the two best rookie quarterbacks last year going into year two? We have a follow-up question, by the way, about year two quarterbacks. What do you think? What would be a good wager with Brock Purdy and Kenny Pickett?
Okay. I like the idea because I'm pretty confident in my dude. I wish Pickett was in the Niners system, throwing to Debo and Kittle and those guys, but so be it. Things like EPA and and some of these other advanced stats, QBR, make up for that stuff. So I don't want to just do basic stats. Who has more passing yards, TD to interception? So maybe you, and I haven't referred to this in a while, the practice squad who are listening could come up with some ideas. And by Monday, we put something in stone and some kind of bet out there. Not money. I mean, something out there that we have to, I'm not dressing up like Little Bo Peep or anything like that, but I mean, something along those lines, that we could have a Pickett versus Purdy battle. And, week one could certainly be involved. That's a little rough on your guy, though. We don't know if he's even going to be there week one. 100%.
Yeah, well, week one's hard. It would have to be a stipulation. If he plays, if they both play, then what is the bet? I think EPA, there's too much Kyle Shanahan baked in there. So that would probably be unfair, skewing to Purdy's side. So I would say not to go EPA because I think that would be unfair on my side.
Yeah, I like your coordinator a lot more than I like my coordinator. To tell you, I'm not fond of Matt Canada whatsoever. That's a good point because if you look at the best EPAs in the last 5 years or so, it's Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Niners quarterbacks. You know what I mean? Like whoever's behind center. So let's make that homework for the practice squad, and you and I can kick it around maybe over the weekend. But I'm up for it. I'll take a shot with my guy.
I like it. So let us know at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL, in the YouTube comments what you think would be a good bet for that. And by next mailbag, I think we'll have something worked out there. I like it. Excited for those two young quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. Greg has a question about year two starters. It says, typically, where do year two starting quarterbacks show the most growth? In making pre-snap reads or play decision-making related? Where do you see Kenny Pickett showing the most improvement? I think Greg might be a Steelers fan here. I would even throw year three quarterbacks in there because I think a lot of the growth you see in year two quarterbacks, you see in year three quarterbacks as well. And I think those are the two biggest years from year 1 to 2. and year 2 to 3 for almost any NFL player, but especially for quarterbacks.
Without question. So needless to say, that's just something I've examined more than ever, this offseason after a rookie guy, and I'm doing Steeler stuff left and right. But even before this, a couple things. This might be a longer answer than people want, but well, they're going to get it. Shieldcopedia does really, really good work. And he did a study. He now is with The Ringer. He was with The Athletic when he did the study. And I think this was the offseason before the Steelers took Pickett, the Atlanta took Ritter, etc. And he did a study that first round rookie starting quarterbacks on average are about the 23rd best quarterback in the league. That's league average as a rookie. If your guy comes in as like the 23rd best quarterback, you're doing okay. That's about the trend. Lawrence was under that. Dak Prescott was over that. I mean, there are some notable exceptions in their rookie year, but on average, your rookie quarterback's about the 23rd best quarterback in the league. And I would say Pickett's probably in that neighborhood.
I would say there's some selection bias there too, because if you're playing as a rookie, you were probably pretty good and drafted pretty high and expected to be good right out of the bat. It's not like a random rookie at another position who has an opportunity to play. Quarterbacks, usually only one of them plays. So if you have a rookie quarterback that's playing, and Brock Purdy's kind of the rare exception of a rookie quarterback that played well, that was not expected at all to take any snaps as a rookie.
Mm-hmm. Without question. And Mahomes didn't play as a rookie. Lamar took over halfway through. He was a late first. Of course, more often than not, you're going to be on a bad team. I mean, Lawrence with that awful Jaguar situation, the Bears with Fields, et cetera, et cetera. But to answer the question with more football specifics, and this really applied to Pickett this year, 2 areas of a passer really are important. And almost every rookie absolutely struggles in the red zone. I mean, you got to think you got 22 human beings in a 30 or less yard area. It's tighter. I always think of like the molecules in a balloon heating up. Everything just moves a little faster, and then the other spot that people might not think about is that 10 to 20 yard range, and Pickett was awful in both. It's not even necessarily over the middle, but 10 to 20 yards downfield. It's not hard to throw bombs, go balls, quick hitters, but to drive that ball between 10 and 20 yards over linebackers, between safeties, coverage is different all the time. Safeties are robbing you coming downhill, things of that nature, and you got to hit them in stride. So those were Kenny's worst spots as a passer, and I keep telling Steeler fans, I'm not saying don't worry, but almost every rookie has those problems. If it doesn't get better, worry. But as a rookie, everyone stinks in those 2 areas as a passer. Of course, there's some other things too. Pre-snap recognition. Pickett in particular invited chaos a little bit more than he should have, where could have read the hot, get it out, things like that. But that's not unnatural either.
Yeah, I mean, speed of the game is such a difficult transition, even with, even if you went to an SEC school, but especially if you weren't facing that sort of speed on many of the defenses you played against, and anticipation. And look, for a rookie quarterback, you're still trying to figure out your own scheme, let alone what everybody else, the 11 guys on the other side of the field are doing, and they're moving a lot faster than they were before. So that anticipation, because you can't in the NFL live by waiting for a guy to get open before you throw the ball. You have to throw before he gets open, and you have to know and trust that guy who's running that dig route behind the linebacker in front of the safety, there's a window there, and that's going to be where that goes, and you have to throw before he makes his break and trust that. And those sort of things are just, I can't imagine how difficult it is for a rookie quarterback to trust that and trust what he sees with everything going on in the field. And I look at somebody like, he's going into year 3, but Zach Wilson's not going to play most likely in year 3. Right. But he had probably one of the biggest transitions that nobody really talked about in the pre-draft lead up, where things were so easy for him. His team was better. His playmakers were better than the defenses he faced. His offensive line was better. He was never under pressure. He could go have fun, throw a little sidearm, it was a nice
run around, right.
Playing football. He gets in the NFL and he's like, oh my God, I am under duress. There are no windows to throw to here. And it was just night and day from BYU to when he showed up with the New York Jets. And I can't imagine how difficult that is for quarterbacks. So speed of the game is probably just the number one thing. Slowing it all down, knowing what you see, trusting what you see, knowing your own scheme, and anticipating what's going to happen out there on the field, and having a lot of playmakers to help you out. And the good offensive line is always nice too.
So a couple other small nuggets. There is a difference between NFL open and college open. You know, some guys don't realize when they have to pull the trigger. Son, that's open. You got to get it out of your hands. Absolutely. Even if you played Alabama, Georgia, LSU every week, the blitz schemes you see, the coverages, I mean, those guys are still in college. They still only have X amount of, time during the week to prepare. And that's same with your offense. You may have a handful of protections as opposed to a dozen or 15. I don't even know the numbers. But, I mean, there's just so much more on your plate to digest, either with your team or the team you're playing. And just seeing Pickett close up, OTAs and minicamp basically just ended. I mean, in the NFL cycle. Last year, he comes to the Steelers as a rookie, and the Steelers are, at that point, getting Mitch Trubisky ready for week 1, who's brand new, giving Mason Rudolph some time here and there, but giving Pickett as much as he can to develop him. Now, the same 3 guys are in camp, and everyone on the planet knows Pickett's a 1, Trubisky's a 2, Rudolph's a 3. And, oh, by the way, just seeing Kenny up close, he added about 15 pounds of muscle. He wasn't busy getting ready for the draft. He lifted weights. He prepared to take the beating that the NFL is going to give him.
He's preparing for football instead of the underwear Olympics.
Yeah, right. He's on a job resume anymore.
Right.
Or an interview anymore.
Interview, right. So next we've got questions about Sean Payton. Is he really the guy for the Denver Broncos? Is he maybe overrated compared to a coach like Mike McCarthy? And Hall of Fame running backs in the mailbag. Plus, jump in the chat. Let us know what you want to talk about. Next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Take your swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets at FanDuel, win or lose on that first bet. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from money line bets to over-unders to who you think is going to hit the first home run of a baseball game. All on an app that's safe, secure, super easy to use. When you win, you get paid out instantly. I love the interface at FanDuel, whether you're on the website or on the app. It is so easy to navigate through the site, find the sports you want to bet on, make your bets, build your own parlays, which is one of the most fun things there is to do at FanDuel. And there's no better place to bet on all the Major League Baseball action, tons of NFL bets for 2023 to be made than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Moving on in our Peacock and Williamson mailbag here, we had a lot of discussion and a lot of questions about the Hall of Fame conversation, specifically with the running back position and comparing someone like Chris Johnson to Derrick Henry. And should Frank Gore get into the Hall of Fame? And I think those are all interesting questions. Let's start with Frank Gore because it actually spawned some conversation on my Locked On 49ers podcast about comparing the Hall of Fame track potentially of Christian McCaffrey, what he would have to do to get to the Hall, his career versus a young Roger Craig, which were so similar. And then we talked a lot about Frank Gore and where he's at and what his resume is like and what it takes to get into the Hall of Fame for all these young running backs that are the best running backs in the league currently. And Roger Craig not in the Hall of Fame. Christian McCaffrey start his career very similar. You got to play deep into your 30s. What did Frank Gore do? He played deep into his 30s, and you got to accumulate stats. Like it or not, in the Hall of Fame, you got to accumulate a ton of stats. And so that's a big part of this conversation. And Joey Bag of Donuts says, does Frank Gore belong in the Hall of Fame? I say no. All he did was be okay for many years. That's not Hall of Fame worthy. What is your feeling? As I know the stats, I just looked them up in the last 24 hours on Frank Gore, and I watched his whole career. From the outside, though, what is your idea of Frank Gore? Is he a Hall of Famer?
Okay, I'll give you that quick, and then at Williamson NFL has a mailbag question for you concerning Gore and Niner running backs after we're done. I think he's a Hall of Famer, and obviously the word compiler is like possession receiver, system quarterback. Everyone kind of, that doesn't sound great. but it's still impressive. I mean, you still got to last the test of time, and these teams don't sign you just to add to your stats. They wanted you. You know what I mean? They're giving you money, and he's not running down on kickoffs. I mean, he's only a running back. I mean, so these teams wanted him and paid him for that long. And so there's some value to that. That doesn't mean, you're a Hall of Famer just because you got a job in the league. You got to do more than that. I think he is, because it's easy to forget his best days. And that's what I wanted to ask you is, he was really good for a big stretch, kind of like we talked about Julio and some of these other dudes. You can remember the last couple years and be like, he wasn't, you don't want him on your fantasy team. He's not worth anything. But there were a lot of years he's a first round pick in fantasy. And that's my 2-part question to you is, do you remember him on his best day? Was he a top 3 running back in the league at that point? And how would you compare him to, I guess off the top of my head, Craig, who you mentioned, Waters, McCaffrey, like some of the best Niner running backs of the last 30 years or whatever?
Yeah, and they're interesting because they were all among the better running backs in the NFL, and maybe not the best. Like, you might poll people right now that would say Christian McCaffrey is maybe the best running back in the league right now. I think that's what's tough, because I brought up, is Christian McCaffrey's peak better than Frank Gore's? And my co-host Eric Crocker looked at me funny. He's like, "How dare you say such a thing about Frank Gore?" Right. And then it's like, you go back and look. Frank Gore in his second year, which was his best year, he had 1,600 rushing yards and another 500 receiving yards and 60 receptions. Those would be so far and away the best numbers of a running back in today's NFL, right? But it's not today's NFL. That was back in 2006. And then it was like, well, how did he wasn't first team All-Pro that year. I was like, well, how the heck is that possible? So I went back and looked. LaDainian Tomlinson, 1,800 rushing yards, right? So those were
first pick in fantasy draft. Yeah, right.
It was a Hall of Famer, Yeah. So, and the other name on that list was Larry Johnson. So Frank Gore that year was third in rushing. Larry Johnson had 416 carries in 2006. To tell you how different the league is now versus then. 416 carries. He had 100 more carries than Frank Gore, and Frank Gore at 316 was pure bell cow numbers, right? So that's how much. I mean, they ran Larry Johnson into the ground, and it's funny seeing all these running backs, and it's the great point, because it's like, someone probably at that point was thinking, Larry Johnson, 1,700 rushing yards, he's probably on a Hall of Fame track, right? And so that's the special part. Either you are so great that you feel like you're one of the best to ever play the game at that position during your career, and it's a shorter career, Calvin Johnson, right? Or you're so good that you play so long and you're among the best for a long, long time. And I would push back on Joey Bag of Donuts saying he was just okay. He was much better than just okay. He might not have been as good as LaDainian Tomlinson, or as good as Adrian Peterson.
Yeah,
but
Adrian Falk,
right? And so of his contemporaries, but he was always among the best. Coaches loved him. He could pick up a blitz. He had a string of 9 years where 8 of those 9 years were 1,000-yard seasons. He had 1,000-yard rushing at age 33 with the Indianapolis Colts. Mm-hmm. And so he was just so good for so long. He didn't just play forever and was mediocre. He was the number one back on all of those teams deep into his 30s. And teams kept wanting him. And when he was 37, there was coaches. That's how well thought of he was around the league. Is people at age 37 are like, I want Frank Gore on my football team. And so he was a really good player. He could catch. He was great vision. He was an awesome player. And when he was younger, he had breakaway ability as well. He was a freak. And that's after ACL injuries at Miami. He was even more of a freak back then. He could have had an even better NFL career. And when you're number 3 all time in rushing yards, you're going to get in the Hall, whether people like it or not.
So Adrian Peterson had some of those qualities too. At the end of his career, he's, 6 game with the Saints or a year here and there, just because he still was effective. I mean, maybe Zeke Elliott will do that too. Who knows? That type of thing. Real quick, you mentioned the U. So when I was at Pitt, we were in the Big East against the U. We lost. They were the U then, and they beat our butts everywhere. Yeah,
that was a tough draw.
Yeah, but we recruited the city of Miami very, very heavily, and never beat the U on guys. But it was great fertile grounds. And then when I was with the Browns, Butch Davis was the head coach, who was the head coach of the U, and there was tons of staffers, Chazinski, all those guys had big-time U backgrounds. And if you ask any of them, McGahee, Portis, Gore, I mean, all those unbelievable backs of that era, without hesitation, they all said, oh, Frank's the best.
Yeah, and unbelievable that he was that good when you had McGahee and Portis and all the
There's
the
more,
talent
yeah,
there.
right.
Unbelievable. Go watch freshman year Frank Gore before the injuries. Watch how explosive he was. And, he's playing behind some guys at that point. But
yeah,
I mean, yeah. So Frank Gore is going to get in, and there's multiple ways to get in. But you can't just be good for a little while. I think that's the point. And I want to bring up Chris Johnson's stats compared to Derrick Henry's stats next, and then talk Sean Payton versus Mike McCarthy. Okay. Thanks once again, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen every day. And thanks for jumping in on this live episode. Make sure you're subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. So we had other questions about Derrick Henry, and the question here from Jacob was about Chris Johnson and how he compares to Derrick Henry, being a Tennessee Titans fan that Jacob is, and he was remembering how good Chris Johnson was. And Matt, I think you would say, and I would say, that Chris Johnson doesn't feel like a Hall of Famer, does he?
Not to me, no. I mean, I know he's a 2,000-yard guy. He had a couple extremely strong years. I'd even throw Eddie George in that conversation from Titan backs, I mean, and Johnson would be third on that list for me. I don't know if I'd rather have George or Henry, but Johnson was great. I mean, he was in the conversation for top 2 or 3 backs, but not long enough in my opinion. Coincidentally, we were just at East Carolina College last year, and it was pretty cool. They had some Chris Johnson stuff there, and good for him. But no, I mean, Priest Holmes to me is a better case than him from that era, someone like that.
Wow, Priest Holmes. So CJ2K, he had a 2,000-yard season, as did Derrick Henry.
Awesome.
And, the thing is Derrick Henry's had a couple of 1,500-yard seasons as well. But even when you stack up young Chris Johnson with young Derrick Henry through age 28 seasons, it's wild, because Derrick Henry and Chris Johnson had, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So Derrick Henry's had more. Let's take out Derrick Henry. Here we go. This is what'll do it. Okay. So through their first so I'm going to take out Derrick Henry's rookie year. He only had
he didn't play a ton as a rookie, right?
Yeah, he only had 490 rushing yards, and Chris Johnson started his career at 23 years old. So that would put both age 23 through 28 seasons, 6 seasons. This is prime years for Chris Johnson. Chris Johnson had the 2,000-yard season. He had a 1,300-yard season. He had 2 1,200-yard seasons. They were all 1,000-yard seasons in his first 6 years in the NFL. He had just under 8,000 rushing yards in his first 6 seasons through his age 28 season.
That's a little better than I remember, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it was star stuff. It's crazy.
Right.
Derrick Henry, through his age 23 through 28 season, he's had 7 seasons now in the NFL, counting his rookie year, but we're not going to count his rookie year stats here. He has almost identical number. It was 7,900 something for Chris Johnson. It is 7,845 for Derrick Henry through 6 seasons, age 23 through age 28. Superstar stuff. And so if it feels like Derrick Henry's on a Hall of Fame track, well, so is Chris Johnson. But what happened to Chris Johnson after age 28, which happens to a lot of backs? Larry Johnson, we were talking about earlier, right? You look down the list of running backs, and you're like, oh man, that guy was awesome for a short time. After age 28, Chris Johnson, 1 year with the Jets, 600 yards, 2 years, and then finished 3 years in Arizona through age 32. He had an 800-yard season, then 95 yards and 114 yards his last 2 years. I mean, it fell off fast. He did nothing in his 30s practically. Derrick Henry's right there. So what Derrick Henry does for the next 4 or 5 years into his 30s is what matters the most for his Hall of Fame resume, because we've seen a lot of running backs. I just went to the Titans, right? And they've had a guy just before Derrick Henry that started
exactly the same team together.
Henry. When you look at
it's
Roger,
great
Craig,
comparison. It's closer than I thought.
Exactly. I was blown away by it when I looked at Roger Craig's numbers. I was like, man, this guy had a 1,500-yard rushing season. He was the first ever 1,000-yard rusher, 1,000-yard receiver. He didn't do much in his 30s, and he's never gotten into the Hall of Fame, and he probably won't. So that's why I'm talking about no lock for Derrick Henry yet. What he does when you get into your 30s for a running back is so key to all of this. And Frank Gore had multiple 1,000-yard seasons in his 30s. Can Derrick Henry do that? And he doesn't have any receiving yards to throw on top of it, to sprinkle on a little bit of a seasoning on top of that Hall of Fame resume.
Great stuff. I mean, I bet Ezekiel Elliott's really close to that as well. Isn't he almost 30? I mean,
so, same draft, 2016.
Right.
This last season, 2022, Derrick Henry finally passed Zeke Elliott in NFL.
Yeah, he's just ahead of him. Right.
So before that, Zeke had more rushing yards, and how fast Zeke has fallen off. So that's what happens in the NFL. So what I've found looking at all these Hall of Fame running backs, Gale Sayers is like the only one I could find where it was like, man, you were, Barry Sanders didn't play long, but he was
Terrell Davis is the one that's I have a little problem
right,
with.
and he still has, and Barry Sanders was still, when he retired, third all-time leading rusher. He would have broken the record so easily if he kept playing, right? So you gotta play into your 30s and play well.
Yeah, and that's going to be a challenge. I mean, he's had a beating. I think a lot of us, and definitely I am guilty of this, Henry's just so different than any back I've ever seen, and so freaky, and he looks like a defensive end, that I immediately think, give him the benefit of the doubt because he's different, but Johnson ran a 4.2. I mean, he had the combine record. You know what I mean? It's not like
he's in his own right. It wasn't very big, though. Like, Derrick Henry's a cyborg, so I'm not going to put it past him. I'm just saying he's not there yet. What he does.
I'm leaning that way more and more. We talk it through. Yeah, exactly. He may need 2 more good years on the Chiefs or Bills or something, possibly, and win something.
So we're going to actually talk Hall of Fame coaches to finish the week tomorrow, Matt. And if I'm not mistaken, Sean Payton's name is on that list of current coaches that are on the Hall of Fame track. Mike McCarthy's name, I don't think, is on that list. And we've got questions here about, I've actually gotten a couple questions over the last few weeks about Sean Payton. And is he maybe overrated about being the savior for those Denver Broncos this year? JDS says, going to ask again for this Twitter Thursday, and this is still an older question, but I've been meaning to get to it. Makes no sense how Sean Payton is viewed so much better when Mike McCarthy is as responsible for developing his Hall of Fame quarterback than Payton. What do you think between these two? Is this something that is does Sean Payton just have a better PR guy? To go further,
that's important.
Mike McCarthy since 1999 has the 4th most wins, 3rd most playoff appearances, 8th best average margin of victory, and a Super Bowl ring, which Sean Payton also has.
The resumes on paper are similar. I'll give you that. And I think this is an interesting discussion. It's kind of like Johnson versus Henry type of thing, that they aren't similar when you watch the tape, but they're similar when you read the resume. You know what I mean? They both have 1 ring. They both went to a lot of playoffs with a Hall of Fame, all-time great type quarterback in Breeze and Rodgers. And people were critical. Hey, how can you only win 1 with those guys? Well, the Brady era makes it hard. I mean, of course. But in my opinion, and this is opinion, this isn't fact, Peyton is definitely a tier above. And I often look at this era of coaches, Reed and Belichick and now Reed, stand alone. I mean, they're potential Mount Rushmore guys. Belichick is a Mount Rushmore guy. But Harbaugh, Peyton, Carroll, Tomlin, to me, are Hall of Famers that are the tier 2 guys that have won rings and aren't going to compete with Belichick's resume, but are really, really good and Hall of Fame head coaches. And I always bring back the Steelers. Bill Cowher got in. I think all those guys are better coaches than Cowher, have a better resume than Cowher. Tomlin to Cowher's apples to apples, of course. But here's the thing about Peyton is, first of all, he has a heavy Parcells background, and that brings a lot of respect for his toughness, the way he sees the game. Like, it's pretty obvious in Denver, the fix is not, we're going to throw the ball 1 million times like Drew Brees. We're going to bring in run blocking linemen, and we're going to pound your face. And they did that more in New Orleans than people realize. But here's the difference to me is people I know or coaches, many of them, offense and defense, but especially offensive minds at the highest level, when they have free time like this time of year, they studied Payton. I mean, like people study Shanahan now. He was that guy.
And it maybe is not fair to McCarthy, but I do feel like McCarthy's been helped more by his quarterbacks.
I do too.
Sean Payton has, even though Sean Payton had Drew Brees, because we saw how much better Drew Brees was with Sean Payton than he was to start his career somewhere else.
Right.
And the Saints got worse after Sean Payton left. And Sean Payton did have a winning season without Drew Brees before he left the Saints and took a year off. So, and so many Sean Payton assistants have gotten jobs and head coach jobs around the league. Dan Campbell right now is in Detroit, right, with Aaron Glenn. They were both from Sean Payton's staff, and and there's a bunch of those. So it's hard on paper. I get the argument, but just doesn't feel the same. And that's probably unfair to McCarthy, maybe. And it's not to put McCarthy down as a coach, but just the way they're thought of, the way they're talked about around the league, it feels like they're in separate tiers. I don't know.
I do too. I think they are in separate tiers. I'm basically certain of it. I don't want to be the lawyer that has to prove that case. And this will sound like a shot at Drew Brees, and it isn't even in a little bit, because he's tremendous. He's unbelievably accurate, great leader, all those things. But if you put Rodgers in that dome in Payton's scheme, and you put Brees in the cold in Green Bay for the same amount of years, it would be different.
Right.
Let's put it that way. You know what I mean? It would be different. I mean,
especially late career Brees, because Brees had a fine arm early in his career, but it kind of caught up with him and his arm troubles and some injuries, and he was not throwing the ball great at the end of his career. Yeah. And they were still winning a whole bunch of football games.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not disrespecting Peyton Manning, but his life was a little easier in that dome play in the AFC South than Brady's was, or Ben, or, you know what I mean? Like, these all-time greats, part of it's just round peg, round hole, great, thrive with what you got, play the cards you were dealt. And Brees was perfect for that city, perfect for that town, division. But I don't know that if you interchange him and Rodgers, it goes as well.
By the way, in the chat, Joey Bag of Donuts says, how about loser has to wear the other team's jersey, talking about 49ers and Steelers in week 1. Let us know what you think. What should the bet be between me and Williamson or Purdy and Pickett this season? Year 2 quarterback's going to be a lot of fun to watch. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you guys today on this live episode. Thanks, everybody, for checking in. Make sure you are subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Matt and I back tomorrow. Might bring up those 2 names of head coaches again as we talk about Hall of Fame coaches.
I like it.
On tomorrow's edition of Peacock and Williamson.